Advanced Studio Happy birthday to one of the world's most beloved authors. Welcome, listeners, to our history article for the month of August. We are happy you joined us today, and we are going to be exploring one of the world's most beloved authors' birthdays. It's a big number they're celebrating this year. It's the 150th anniversary of Beatrix Potter's birthday. Now, I am joined today by two great panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves right now.
Hello listeners, my name's Gordon. I'm a teacher from Britain, and I'm very happy to be doing this article with you, Amanda, because I love this author.
Wow, and I know you have a lot to share with us today, so we're looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us, Gordon. And over on my left, I have another great panelist.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter. I teach on Let's Talk in English, but it's good to speak in advanced English sometimes, so I'm happy to be here.
You can use some words with a larger vocabulary today, Peter.
Yes, I can.
Well, we are talking about Beatrix Potter, so I just wanted to ask you both, Gordon, first, do you know who Beatrix Potter is?
Yes, I certainly do. I don't know if it's because I grew up in Britain, but I feel like everyone knows who this woman is. Fantastic author who maybe many of us, when we first started reading, became familiar with her books because her children's stories are so well known around the world.
When did you first come into contact with Beatrix Potter?
I must have been very small. My family still have the little Beatrix Potter books that I had growing up.
Right.
And they look old. So I think from when I was first beginning to read as a toddler.
Right. And what about you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm from America, but this woman is very well known, and the story of Peter Rabbit is too. So I would say she is iconic, both in Britain and in America. My mom read to me when I was growing up, so I knew many stories as a kid, and when I heard that we were going to talk about her today, I just all these little memories of childhood came popping up, and even seen on our first page here in that top right corner, there's a picture of a book, and I am very familiar with this cover because I have seen that book in my home my whole life. So yes, I'm very familiar with her, and she is a part of so many children's childhood, you know.
I can agree with that. I know growing up as well, Gordon, you mentioned the size of the books. There were small size books, right? And I even going through this article, I pictured the books that are sitting on my parents' bookshelves, even today, of Beatrix Potter. I grew up reading her, and it's really interesting, but I even have a child's plate, and the knife and the fork and the cup. They all have the designs of Beatrix Potter on.
Yeah, we have some of those too. They look really great. But I think they ended up in the sandbox at one point. I think we had played with them or we took them outside and started playing with them. But
right.
Yeah, those are part of my childhood memories too.
Actually, Peter, they're part of my treasure box.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, the images are so well known over the whole world because one of the things about Beatrix Potter is her beautiful drawings of the characters she came up with have been put on merchandise all over the world, on tea towels and plates and T-shirts. Yeah,
and that style, I think, has really become part of almost children's illustrations, is that, light watercolor pen feel. I mean, we see so much of that. It looks great in children's illustrations, and, we'll learn about her today, so that'll be great.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to learning a little bit more. So let's turn to our first reading for today. Listeners, you can turn to page 42 in your Advanced magazine or on your digital device. And let's begin today's reading on column 1.
a celebration of Beatrix Potter's 150th birthday. Happy birthday to one of the world's most beloved authors. On Beatrix Potter's 150th, a lot you might not know. There is a lot to learn about the creations of Beatrix Potter. Not only is she the author and illustrator of one of the world's most famous children's books, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, but also a pioneering conservationist with the spirit of a scientist. The world will celebrate the 150th anniversary of Potter's birth this year. The Overture Center of Madison, Wisconsin, is hosting Peter Rabbit Tales. The touring show specializes in theater for young audiences, especially classic tales, combining masked actors, life-size puppets, music, and more. Creating the show has been a tremendous amount of fun, because inherent in all the stories is the family and how it all pulls together, said Jennifer Blatchley Smith, one of the show's artistic directors. And yet Potter's work, which Smith describes as slightly edgy, is grounded in a unique reality, she said. There's a great humor and wit, and the element of truthfulness that the animals have to live as animals, even if they wear clothes, she said. The characters' lives are filled with danger.
Well, we begin today with the article titled On Beatrix Potter's 150th, A Lot You Might Not Know. And if you're just joining the show, we're talking about Beatrix Potter. This year will be her 150th birthday. And we're not sure if you grew up with Beatrix Potter in your home. She is quite a well-known author and illustrator from Britain. And so I think any of the countries that are associated with Britain know about her. And maybe they have their books at home, just as we've been sharing earlier today. Now we go into the beginning of this paragraph, learning a lot. It says there is a lot to learn about the creations of Beatrix Potter. And we learn that she is an author and an illustrator, but she has one famous book, Gordon. One of the most famous children's books. What is that titled?
Yeah, the title of that book is The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And you can see it at the top right of page 42, as Peter has already highlighted. This was the first book she published. And yeah, so many people know this story. It's a wonderful tale of Peter Rabbit who gets himself into a bit of mischief, a bit of trouble, and escapes with his life back to his mum.
Right, yes. And Peter, do you remember this story well?
Well, of course, it's got my name in it, Peter Rabbit. That was a nickname I had at school. But I remember Peter the Rabbit being kind of selfish, and I never liked that. But the story itself is very good. And I remember having a garden growing up in our backyard, so I always kind of thought of Peter the Rabbit and Peter myself. So, yes, of course I remember this book.
Well, it's interesting to note, too, that this tale was written for a young boy. He was 5 years old. His name was Noel Moore, and he happened to be the son of Beatrix Potter's former governess. And I just wondered, Gordon, can you explain to the listeners what a governess is?
Oh, okay. A governess is someone who looks after you when you're little, so your parents don't have to full-time care for you. So they will raise you, they'll teach you good manners, and they'll probably dress you when you're little and put you to bed. And that in itself shows you that Beatrix came from a wealthy family because they could afford to employ a full-time governess to look after Beatrix and her brother when they were little.
Right. Okay, that's great. Well, in this first paragraph, we also we learn that she is an author and an illustrator, but we also learn something else about her, Peter.
Yes, she was a conservationist, and this is very kind of a new idea at the time, and especially for a woman to be doing this too. But regardless, she cared for the environment. We can see the word conserve, and that usually has to do with conserving the environment because we only have so much of it, so we've got to save it.
Right. And we see that she also had the spirit of a scientist, and we will learn a little bit more about that as we go on. What is the world celebrating this year?
So, as we've mentioned, she is turning 150 this year. Beatrix Potter was born in 1866. So it's 2016. 150 years ago she was born, and there are many fans all over the world, so there's lots of events celebrating this anniversary.
Right, and we learn about one here in Madison, Wisconsin. At the Overture Center, they will be hosting what is called the Peter Rabbit Tales. And we learn that that is a touring show specializing in theater for young audiences, so for children and teenagers, and especially going over the classic tales of Beatrix Potter. And what do they combine in their theater, Peter?
So they have some actors wearing masks, as well as some life-sized puppets. They're going to have some music, so it should be a fun time.
Now, Gordon, earlier, before the show, we were talking just about Beatrix Potter and how many books she's actually written. You had a piece of paper there.
Yeah, that's correct. I have a list of the books that she published. There are 23 of her traditional tales, the tales of characters she wrote and published during her life. And then there are about 12 other books that were published either during her life or after her life. But it's the 23 traditional tales of books that we know, and most of them begin the tale of someone. So the tale of Peter Rabbit or the tale of Benjamin Bunny.
So if you are a theater group, I'm sure that's a lot of material you could be working with there. Now, just for our listeners, that a lot of her books have been translated into other languages. They've been translated into about 36 different languages, with 45 million copies sold around the world. So that is quite an effort right there. Now, we learn a little bit more about this Overture Center in the next paragraph, Peter.
Yes, that's right. So it's slightly edgy, but it has just a unique reality to it, which just means it's got kind of a special feeling to it. It mixes, maybe fantasy with reality.
Right, and we hear from Jennifer Blatchley Smith. She's one of the show's artistic directors. I think what she had to say was quite interesting. She says that creating the show has been a tremendous amount of fun because inherent in all the stories is the family and how it all pulls together. When something is inherent, it is the basic part or the fundamental part of something. So we see that in a lot of Beatrix Potter stories, it's about family and that family coming together. So that is something about Beatrix Potter's books that has stood out to this artistic director. And so it's great to see that they're doing something a little different with that. We go on to see that it has a lot of humor and wit, Gordon.
Yeah, I really like what she points out here, that the animals in Beatrix Potter's book, they are animals, but they're somewhat dressed up in human clothes. And there's a lovely balance in the books between them being the animals, but also having human characteristics. They wear clothes and they have to come home for dinner. And I really love that balance in the book.
Now, I think what's very interesting is that adds to their character and their personality, right, in the books. And we see that with Peter Rabbit. Right, he has his little jacket, his suit jacket on, and his waistcoat on. Yes,
and it's new, it's nice, and Mom is very upset when he ruins his jacket. And I remember specifically he has to run away at some point from some danger, and he has to fit under a gate or a fence, and he's a little bit too fat. And so he has to squeeze under there because he's, greedy and he likes to eat, and he loses a button. And so we see how, it's a rabbit, but at the same time, he's very human at the same time.
Right, so she has a very good gift at combining all of these elements together. Well, listeners, let's go on to our next reading for today in column 2 to learn a little bit more about Beatrix Potter.
An early love of nature. Potter grew up the daughter of a well-to-do Victorian family, but along with her brother filled an entire floor of their large house in London with all sorts of animals, said Anne London, Professor Emerita for the UW-Madison School of Library and Information Studies. They went out to the country a lot on weekends and excursions and brought back animals, she said. In that menagerie, she had rabbits, a hedgehog, mice, and lots of insects. As an adult, she was a frustrated botanical illustrator. That's the career she would have chosen rather than being a children's book author. But that field was not open to her because she was female, London said. She was a scientist. She did meticulous botanical illustrations that today are getting huge respect from the science community, London said.
Well, if you're just joining this show, listeners, we're talking about Beatrix Potter, and this year she turns 150. It's her birthday this year, 150th birthday, and she is one of the world's beloved authors and illustrators. We've learned so far that she is also a conservationist, so it's very important to her that we look after our environment. And we've been introduced to one of her famous characters, Mr. Peter Rabbit, who, Peter, you've been sharing a little bit about. Was he your favorite Beatrix Potter character?
Peter Rabbit is a little bit selfish and lazy, and he causes trouble. So he's not my favorite character, but he's definitely iconic, and he kind of embodies the whole work of Beatrix Potter. When you think Peter Rabbit, you think of Beatrix Potter and the rest of her stories, her illustrations. So in that sense, I do like him.
What about you, Gordon? Who is your favorite Beatrix Potter character?
I really like Mrs. Tiggy Winkle. I remember this book because it's one of the ones I still have. And Mrs. Tiggy Winkle is a old lady hedgehog. And she kind of has this house near Peter Rabbit, because Peter Rabbit drops by in that story, and she's like doing all the washing up for everyone, like the washing of their clothes. And I kind of just liked it's just like this little hedgehog bustling around cleaning all these clothes, and it's just really quaint, that little book. And it's just like The Tale of Peter Rabbit. It's a small book, and yeah, it's lovely. So I really remember that one from my childhood.
I think I like Peter Rabbit's friends, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail.
Oh, they're his sisters.
Yeah, I like them. I think they're cute. I just like the names even, to be able to say Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail.
And they're well-behaved, unlike Peter Rabbit. In The Tale of Peter Rabbit, they go and pick blackberries as they're supposed to, while Peter breaks into the farmer's garden and starts eating his carrots and stuff.
There you go. See, so as you are listening, listeners, you're learning more about The Tale of Peter Rabbit. But we do encourage you to go and read the book as well to learn more. But we go on in this next column to learn a little bit about Beatrix Potter's background. Now, we did mention this earlier, that she came from a well-to-do family. Gordon, what does well-to-do mean?
Well, it means they have a lot of money. They're wealthy or they're rich. So we talked about how they could afford a governess, someone to look after and maybe teach Beatrix a little bit. And her brother. She had a brother.
Now we see here it also says Victorian family. What does that mean?
Well, one of the famous queens in British history is Queen Victoria, who reigned for a very, very long time, from 1837 to 1901. And we refer to that whole era of British history as the Victorian period. So she grew up during that period in a wealthy Victorian family.
Good. Okay, now she also had a brother, Peter. And what did they used to do?
Well, they loved animals, and so they filled the whole floor of their house with animals, all kinds.
That's right, and we learned this from Anne London. She's a professor emerita from the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Library and Information Studies, and she knows a lot about Beatrix Potter. You can go down to even see a sidebar there about the Beatrix Potter Society and learn a little bit more about her. But she goes on to say something about what Beatrix and her family used to do, Gordon.
Yes, they used to go to the countryside, or the country, as we call it, on weekends, and her and her brother would actually bring back animals from the countryside. I'd love to know how they were going about catching these animals without hurting them.
Yeah.
So they end up with a menagerie, is the word that we have here, which is a wonderful word meaning a whole bunch of animals. And yeah, she had rabbits and hedgehogs and mice. They really caught quite a lot. I'm quite impressed by their skills of catching wild animals.
Mm-hmm. You can see where she got a lot of her inspiration from for her illustrations, right?
Yeah, and I think this isn't a normal thing to happen for a home in this time period, even today, to have more than just a pet dog or a cat, but to have like these non-traditional pets at home. One of the reasons might be because they are wealthy, and so it doesn't matter so much to break the normal ways of doing things, and they're able to do it. But I think it just shows how their parents encouraged their interests, which I think, today is more common, but they encouraged them to love and enjoy nature and animals.
Right. And I think that's very interesting. I learned while studying for this article that her and her brother grew up in isolation a lot from other children. And perhaps we're not sure if that's because they were well-to-do or they had a governess at home, so they didn't really need to go out and about. But they did spend a lot of time having holidays in Scotland and the Lake District. Now, I know, Gordon, you have been to the Lake District before, have you?
Yes, I've been to the Lake District a number of times. It is, in my opinion, probably the most beautiful part of Britain, where I'm from. So I'm not from the Lake District, so I also think I'm from a very beautiful part. But the Lake District has mountains and lakes and forests, and we'll find out as we read on in the next few days of this article, like Beatrix Potter had a big effect on the Lake District, and the reason it's still there today is because of her.
Right. Okay, and that's great. We actually learn from her childhood she was catching all these animals, but then as an adult, she was a frustrated botanical illustrator. What does that mean, Peter?
Well, botanical's talking about any kind of flower or plant, and she wanted to illustrate different plants for various reasons, like for science or things like that. But she was frustrated. The reason she was frustrated was because she was very capable and very talented, obviously, at this job, but she was not very successful at it because she was a woman.
Good, yes. We go on to see here that that's actually the career that she would have chosen if she could, rather than being a children's book author. But we learned that this wasn't open to her, Gordon. Yeah,
this is a very different time, the 19th century in Britain. She was young long before women got the vote in 1918, and at this time there were plenty of things that women just couldn't do, or society wouldn't let them do. So it's a real big shame when you think of this amazing talent. She can draw these wonderful pictures, and there's a few scattered around the magazine if you've got the magazine open. And they're just her kids' drawings. Apparently she's also was very talented at drawing plants and nature and produced some very scientific, expert drawings.
And that's why we go on to see here that Anne London said she was a scientist. She did meticulous botanical illustrations. And Peter, what do we mean by meticulous?
Meticulous, I always think of very small or fine details. When someone is meticulous, they care very much about detail. all the very small details.
Right. And Gordon, as you were just saying, this was something that she was also known for, was her botanical illustrations. In fact, today, she is getting huge respect from the science community. So now she's being recognized for her work.
Yeah, which is great. I think we've already learnt about the Beatrix Potter Society, which is down there in the sidebar, and they've discovered a lot more than just her children's books, which she sold lots of, and that's where her money came from. But clearly a very talented woman with many interests.
And we see that earlier we talked about her being a conservationist, and so that is also in line with her being a scientist and having these meticulous botanical illustrations. And we hope we can learn more as we go on to think about tomorrow. But for now, we hope, listeners, that you have enjoyed learning a little bit about the history of who Beatrix Potter is, and even a little bit about Peter Rabbit, the tale of Peter Rabbit, her most famous children's book. Now, do you have any childhood books, listeners, that you remember fondly? And perhaps you can share that with us. You could do that through Facebook or our email. We really encourage you to share with us your fond memories of your childhood books. But for now, listeners, thanks for joining us. Make sure you come back next time here to Advanced Radio. But for now, this is Amanda.
And this is Gordon.
And this is Peter.
Saying goodbye.
Goodbye.